Mr. Shane.
Hello.
Hi. Where did you grow up?
I grew up part in California and part in Texas. Till I was about 10, I grew up in California, born in Lodi, Northern California, but moved around a bunch when I was little. And by the time I was 10, I mostly settled in Abilene, Texas. So my teenage years were there and college years. So I have some deep roots in Abilene where my
Hmm.
parents and my brother still live.
Hmm. And you liked it?
I liked, yeah, I did. I liked it because it was family friendly, small, medium sized town. And I liked not moving around.
Hmm. Did you
I
have to
liked
do that a
having
lot
some
in
friends and
California?
being settled for a while. Yeah.
Hmm. Why did you move in the first place to
So my
Texas?
dad was looking for jobs. I was telling a friend of mine last week that I never wanted my kids to move around when they were small because I had to do it, and it was hard changing schools and making new friends. And um, we sometimes we live with our relatives while my dad was looking for work. For a while, we lived in the back of a Toyota camper,
Hmm.
Toyota pickup with a camper shell,
Hmm.
and I never felt deprived or hungry or scared, but
Hmm.
I did feel constantly on the outside looking in,
Yeah.
not knowing anybody, and then just constantly leaving people, leaving friends,
Hmm.
leaving houses, leaving pets. That was just a lot of loss,
Hmm.
and I didn't want my kids to have to go through that. So I did my best just not to move around so much.
And then you decided Salinas was for you.
Yeah, well, and that was a really tough move because my youngest, was a senior in high school that year.
Hmm. Yeah, my mom went through something similar with her parents, or for her sisters. They
Yeah.
moved from Italy at the time, and one of them was halfway through senior year when she moved.
Okay, hang on.
The
Your mom,
oldest. Hmm.
your mom's sisters came from Italy.
They were there for like 4 years.
I didn't know that. Oh,
So
in the
I
military.
think yes, because their Poppy worked with the military.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so a similar situation. But it's one that they don't regret to this day. That they're it was it's a change and it's a shock, but
Yep.
they work through it. You did you ever have like a crisis of faith when you were younger, or did you? I mean, I
I
assume
had,
we all do, but
I had a crisis. I, I. That's a good question. Biggest crisis of my life so far. I hope it's the biggest one I ever has had, was the loss of a close friend in high school,
mm,
and in a car accident.
mm,
And
sorry to hear
I
that.
was 17. Thanks. Yeah. It floored me. It just shook my world.
Mm,
And I guess it could have been a crisis of faith, except for the fact that when I felt like everything was taken away from me, I went towards God instead of away from Him.
mm-hmm.
I don't know why. Some people do the opposite. I don't know what it was in me, but I was drawn to prayer and to reading the Bible,
The comfort.
and it was extremely. I found all that extremely comforting and satisfying, and
Mm.
I,
And that.
it just really. It was an experience that really deepened my faith. Whereas with some people, they go through the same thing and walk away, or
Mm,
their faith would be weakened by it.
yeah.
So I
I
don't.
think I think some people do gravitate towards the comfort side, for sure. Um, I think a lot of people don't like the because then you get like a crash course in the reality of death, the inescapable
But it
reality of
was. It
that.
felt like
So
a crash
people,
course.
I
Like,
think,
yeah,
especially atheist types, will tend towards why would I believe in a God that allows me to feel this amount of suffering?
yeah. How could a good God let me
Hmm.
put me through hell on earth?
Yeah, and I can't imagine what you went through. I never had a friend pass away like that, so I feel for you.
The, one of the best scriptures that comforted me was in the Psalms 34. It says that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted
Mm-hmm.
and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So I identified with those descriptions. I was crushed in spirit, and I was brokenhearted, and I wanted the Lord to be close to me, and I wanted Him to save me, to bring me through this trial.
Yeah.
And I really leaned on Him and felt a sense of purpose. Eventually, over time, I really felt how short life was. I felt like, man, I could be gone anytime. All my friends could be gone anytime. I don't want to waste my life. My life is too short to just blow it off like it's not valuable. I really want my life to count for something.
Yeah.
To have purpose and meaning. And
that's what drew you to religious studies.
So I was already very interested in the Bible and in.
You grew up Christian?
Church. Yeah, I grew up. My parents, I don't know if I told you this last time, but my parents grew up attending church but not being that interested. And when they got out of the house and went on their own, they kind of left all that behind, God and the Bible and church, for their young adulthood. But then when they met each other, which was in church, their parents hooked them up on a blind date. Their moms, because both of their moms were very religious churchgoers. They met in church, and then they, for various reasons, decided that they wanted to devote themselves to serving God in a sense where not for income or for a living like I'm doing, but not professionally, but just they felt like they wanted to serve God wholeheartedly and not just do their own thing and live life their own way. So they kind of had that conversion experience in a sense. Even though they grew up as kids being taught what they believed, they walked away from it and then came back.
I see.
And so when I was born and my brother, we grew up with what we saw as being a very sincere, very active and passionate faith. It wasn't, my parents weren't going through the motions when they went to church. I could tell. It was genuine. I could tell my parents were very enthusiastic about what they believed, and they constantly read the Bible and constantly shared it with people and constantly were serving and helping people, and the church and the Bible is very important to them. And it was, I think their excitement came from the fact that they had walked away from it and then came back. It wasn't just their parents' faith handed down to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe that the strongest Christians, maybe not all of them, but the strongest Christians are the ones who fully understand what it's like to not walk the faith, to not live the faith.
I tell people, if you've never doubted, I'm not sure you really believe.
Exactly. There's no way you didn't doubt. We all know that.
You may be just taking it for granted.
Yeah.
You may just be assuming. I mean, the Bible says the demons believe in God.
I love that line and that saying, because that is a really big reality. Especially any Christian who, like, once you hit that line, you're like, wow, that is true. What do I do about that?
Right. So believing in God,
just believing doesn't mean anything.
Believing in God doesn't mean anything. That's like believing in gravity or something. It's just okay. Most people believe in that. 97% of the world believes in a God or some kind of higher power. So that's no big deal. But how do you live? What do you do? What difference does it make? So I would always look around at church at my friends and other people, and I'd see some of them just kind of going through the cultural motions of this is what I'm supposed to do because I'm a good person, or I'm an American, or this is just the way I was born. I was born into this, and I just accept it without questioning. To me, that's not very genuine. I don't want to judge everybody, but I'm saying that kind of faith, when it's tested, can easily be lost.
Yeah.
When push comes to shove, and you're like, are you gonna sacrifice for your faith? Are you gonna lay it all on the line? Is it gonna get you through the darkest moments, or is it just convenient for you to believe? I grew up, as a teenager in Texas, where church is a lot more popular than it is in California.
Yeah.
My wife grew up in
Understatement.
southern.
Yeah.
My wife grew up in Southern California, San Diego, where church was not very popular. To go to church, you had to want to go to church. It was like countercultural
Yeah.
for my wife to go to church. Not many people did go to church. In Texas, it's more culturally, socially, not just accepted but expected.
Hmm.
Going to church is like what everybody does.
Yeah. No one would be surprised if you said you went to church on Sundays. They'd be like, okay, so
Yeah,
does
everybody
everyone I
does.
know.
Yeah, yeah. I did a survey, an unofficial survey in 2001, 2002, when I moved back from California to Texas. I interviewed about 50 to 100 people over a month or two, every walk of life. The person that cut my hair, the person at the grocery store, neighbors, everybody I met, and asked them if they went to church somewhere, or if I didn't ask them if they're Christians. I said, do you go to church anywhere? Or do you have a church? Guess how many of those people that I interviewed, between 50 and 100 people, guess how many said no, they did not attend any church?
I'm gonna go with 10.
Less.
Less than 10. Wow, 5.
Less than one.
Wow.
Not a single person I asked. Now,
Where was
when
this?
I pressed them a little, this was Abilene, Texas, small
Okay.
town in West
Okay.
Texas. When I pressed them a little bit, I said, okay, where do you go to church? Some of them couldn't name the church they attended. Like, it's been that long since they've been there, but no one would claim they don't attend church because that's not socially acceptable.
Ah, I see. Everyone was trying to go with the flow, not be,
Right. And
you know.
some were genuine and some weren't, but it's really hard to tell. In fact, it's impossible to tell. Just walk into a church, you look and see people there, you think, well, they must want to be there. That's not true everywhere. I had a guy in San Diego, genuinely, who's not a Christian. He's an atheist, but he's married to a Christian who attended our church and had kids. I had lunch with him one time, and he said, Shane, do all the people in your church really believe in God? Because he'd attended once or twice, and he wondered, there's got to be other people like him that are just showing up to be polite, but they don't really believe any of that stuff.
Also, the family's nice. It's nice to see people you know, whether or not you're Christian.
So I told him, yeah, believe it or not, most of the people there actually do believe in God. And
Yeah.
I think he was hung up on evolution and some of the science, the relationship between the Bible and science. We had 2 or 3 conversations, and we didn't get very far into. I think he said in college he started disbelieving.
Yeah.
And he was
I think that's a universal truth.
Classes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a universal truth. Once you get to college, there's no choice but to at least have some doubt. I mean, it can't constantly be confirmation. There has to be some sort of exposure to some other values.
So in California, Heidi said she grew up, and it was kind of easy to tell who was serious about being a Christian and who wasn't, because you didn't come to church just for the heck of it, you know. In her experience, the people that came to church were very genuine about their faith. Compared to her. She also went to college in Texas, which is where I met her, and her experiences were different between California and Texas, because she was kind of surprised how many people went to church but didn't live like Christians.
Yeah. Didn't
really make much effort to. They were socially Christian, but that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was at Crossroads, long before you even knew about it, and there wasn't really a comment because I didn't know everybody well, but I recognized that there was a heavy amount of what I was calling at the time blind faith, and I would still say that is true in churches a lot of the time, where it's you accept it, but you're not very critical of it, and you're kind of just going there, listening to the sermons and the music, and then going home, and it's just. And if someone asked you, are you Christian? You'd say, yes, I am 100%. And then you'd say, I believe in Jesus Christ and I believe in the Bible. And then you would go about your life, and then you would go to church on Sunday and never really dive into exactly what it means.
Yes.
Exactly how should you live your life?
I think that's
standard.
A problem. One of my favorite professors said that there should be heresy spoken every Sunday morning in your Bible class. I said, what do you mean by that?
At least, brought up.
But he said people should be asking questions and should feel safe enough to say what they really believe. Because he said, I guarantee you, half of the people in there believe heresy. They believe things that are untrue,
Mm.
but they don't express it. They don't vocalize it. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, they don't dig for the deeper truth. They just kind of assume and they stay on the surface level.
And
So
generally
we
speaking,
should
I don't think they're pressed to either.
no, and but we should be. We
Mm-hmm.
should be challenging and growing people's faith. Jesus challenged the religious establishment and the assumed religious teachings of his day. He challenged them so much that the religious people killed him.
Yeah.
They put him
Yeah.
to death because he was such a heretic.
Mm-hmm.
He was seen as such a heretic.
Mm. Where would you say, because this is just one thing I've been thinking about recently, and it's kind of a small thing. Where would you say the climax of the Jesus' story was? Was it the cross, or would it? Because that totally makes sense. The cross is the most obvious answer on the death of Jesus. I
Okay.
would actually bring it a little earlier and say that the climax started at the conversation with Pilate on the nature of truth.
What is truth?
Yeah, what is truth? And that's for me has been kind of really impactful. That's how I want to live my life. Because if
Questioning.
yeah, exactly, the searching and pining for truth.
And truth has no fear of investigation.
Yeah, yeah.
Who somebody famous said that, but I can't remember who said that.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
I've heard that from all my professors. Truth has no fear of investigation.
Mm-hmm.
There's there's nothing to be afraid of when you're pursuing truth. There's no wrong questions to ask.
Yeah, yeah. I wish that in that this is not a comment on you or what you believe, but like I wish that was something that was in the hearts of every Christian. But unfortunately, I think that isn't exactly in the hearts of every Christian.
And
I think most of them look
of
past that.
non-Christians, I think that
Oh
I
yeah,
think
of
that's a
course,
human.
of course.
That's a
No,
human.
if you look at society right now, it's not a Christian thing not
Right.
specifically a Christian thing that how we got to here.
Yeah, that's a human problem.
Yeah.
We have confirmation bias. All of us
Mm-hmm.
do.
Oh, it's so hard to get
We
past that. You have to figure
we
out
hear what
ways.
we want to hear, and we filter out what doesn't confirm or doesn't align with what we already believe. We just filter it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's
It's
why I'm really thankful that I get to learn from you and learn from your story, because I don't like just reading people that write things I agree with or listening to people that say things I agree with. I want to hear the other side.
it's good to be challenged, and it feels good to be challenged too. Like when you actually are genuine in it and no one's fighting, it's just like I genuinely want to challenge these ideas even within
Because that's
myself.
how you grow. I like to
Yeah,
learn
yeah.
and grow. And somebody said that if you're God, your version of God, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a Christian God or a higher power, if your God never challenges you or corrects you,
Mm-hmm.
then that's a God you've made in your own image. You're just looking in the mirror. So the thing in America, the American
I like
style
it.
is the American style is buffet religion. We pick and choose. It's like going to a buffet. We pick and choose what we like about God, and then what we don't like about God, or that is kind of off-putting to us or distasteful to us, we just leave that aside. So a lot of Christians they skip over the parts about hell that are uncomfortable to them in the Bible, because Jesus talked about hell quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and Jesus is seen as this nice, loving, praying with kids and
Yeah.
gentle, riding on a donkey. He is all that. But Jesus had some laser sharp words for people, particularly religious people.
Mm-hmm. How can I get into the kingdom of heaven? Follow the commandments, and then it was I follow the commandments, and then it was sell all your stuff and follow me.
He's like, nope, I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. The nature, the truth of what it, how hard it
Jesus
is.
says, if you want to follow me, you have to deny yourself daily, pick
Yeah.
up your cross, and follow me. Those are harsh words.
Mm-hmm.
And if your God, whoever he is or she is or it is, if your God doesn't challenge you, that's probably because you've just made up your God to satisfy you. That's in your own image.
Yeah.
I think even Christians do that. I think that's a common human tendency.
Yeah. Yeah. The challenge has to be there.
And one of the marks of a real God, I think this is from Tim Keller probably, one of the marks of a true, authentic God is that he is other, and he can speak to you and grow you and correct you from outside yourself. from a different perspective. I, I can't, just with my family, I can only learn and grow to a certain extent. I really need my wife and children and friends, other people in my life, to speak into my experience from outside of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
A third
They help
party.
you grow.
Yeah, and I think a real God also does that to us. He comes into our experience and says things to us like Jesus does that we would not say to ourselves.
Mm.
I was thinking of this just today. I mean, who else in the history of the world, has ever forgiven their enemies?
Well,
I
I
mean,
mean, there are examples, but I see what you mean.
but who goes around teaching people to love their enemies and pray for their enemies? And
Mm. It's
I mean,
wild.
the the normal human thing to do is to love those who love you,
Mm-hmm.
to hate your enemies and do good to those who do good to you. And Jesus turned that on its ear and said, you got to love the people who hate you
Mm-hmm.
and bless the people who curse you,
Yeah.
and pray for those who persecute you. And then he did it himself when he hung on the cross. He said, Father, forgive these people. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's very, very unusual. In fact, I'd say it's counter-human. It's non-human. It's really spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
what Jesus did, the way he lived.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess because I asked you your background, I'll give you a little bit of mine, and then we can
I'd
jump
love to hear.
into the question that I already told you that I was going to ask you on. Do you believe in God? But
Right.
first, you did ask me for a little over text what my story was as far as why I'm no longer in the faith. I grew up Christian, and my first remembrance of atheism, I actually thought it was the same thing as Satanism, and I thought that's a really interesting thing to look back on, because that's a very wrong. It's very, very incorrect about what atheism is. And I remember one of the earlier times of me thinking about that was about the time when the movie The Golden Compass came out,
Uh-huh.
which in the book series ends with one of the characters killing that story's god. So it's a rough story, but and that's how that one ends. And because of that, my parents told me it was a satanic book. It was a satanic series, so they didn't want me to see it. And I thought that was really interesting. That was weird and strange, and I guess it was true because they told me. And I also remember them telling me a long time ago when I was younger, a series like Harry Potter, they didn't want me to watch because they were afraid that I would think it was real. And I remember thinking that was really wild, and how everybody I knew was talking about this book, and I didn't know anything about it.
I love Harry Potter. Yeah, I've read them all.
Yeah, it's there. I haven't read them, but the movies are very, very, very good.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, good series. Anyway, you accept the reality in which you're given, and the reality in which I was given was biblical texts. And my parents didn't do nothing. It's not like they did nothing throughout my childhood. As far as conversations go, I would say probably virtually zero. But they did send me to a Christian school, a high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a great time in elementary school. I was very on the outcast, like you said. It wasn't because we moved around a lot. I don't know, maybe I was just socially inept or something like that. But elementary was very rough for me. I could have been bullied a lot more if it wasn't for the fact that I had a cousin in the same grade as me, and she was very popular. So I feel like people knew that we were cousins and kind of just left me alone for the most part, which is better than being abused for years, you know what I mean? Middle school was a little better. I made some friends, but then I went to a Christian school, and lost them all. And for about half a year, I remember being so alone. And then I made friends, and by the end of my senior year, I had actually a friend group that I liked, and went to college with a couple of them, and both of them actually ended up getting married to each other.
Really?
Yeah, and they had a nice little wedding in the same place that I got married.
Huh.
But anyway, in high school, you as a Christian school, you actually start learning about some of the details that happen in the book. One of the ones that I remember being hung up on was the story of the flood and the story of Babel, and I had a vague understanding of what Pangea was, like the evolutionists would call it, where the main landmass that started before they separated.
Yes.
And it's really hard to, from a Christian perspective, from where I was, figure out why were they all together at one point and then not together at another point. And the way I explained that was, at the Tower of Babel, when he separated the people, he separated the lands, and that's generally accepted as the fundamentalist truth.
Really?
And that made sense to me. So, and that's kind of how I handled all those changes for a very long time, for years after, for all 4 of those years, and then a little bit into college as well. You get to this wall that you can't scale, so you have to figure out a way to scale that wall anyway, because you have to keep going. You can't just say, well, I don't know, and then move on with your life. You actually said, if you can, tackle the question itself. So how does it make sense that the land masses were together at one point, and how does it make sense they're not that way anymore? Well, God did it himself. And that works to a point. Until you start, and then that itching question in the back of your mind hits, and you're like, okay, well, I can explain that physical thing away. That's not very difficult. How do I explain the statement that homosexuality is in fact a sin worthy of similar to any other sin, or actually the same as any other sin? How do I contend with the idea that sodomy itself is a sin? And you can go around a lot of ways and kind of make sense of how sodomy itself would be a sin, but worthy of damnation is the part that really gets stuck. That's one of them. And at the time, it wasn't specifically that I got stuck on, but it was other things like, what do you mean there was a worldwide flood? What do you? You can look into it. There is no way that it's possible, and I would like to say that it was possible.
This is in college.
In college, yeah, in college, from college to today is a lot of the things that I went through. One of the other things was more recently is like, I don't even consider regeneration or healing possible by anyone, especially not like a church leader or anything like that. I remember in high school when they brought in an outside speaker to talk to the group, and he actually brought up some of the students who had ailments and tried to heal them.
Wow.
And he tried to heal a guy of his burst eardrum. That didn't work out. And then he tried to heal a guy who had constant ringing in one ear, and apparently it worked on him, so good for him.
Wow.
The kid was a little sketchy, so I wouldn't say it was necessarily a healing moment, but I think that he might have been going through some mental stuff at the time. So, but hey, if praying to God helps you get through and helps you feel better in a mental state, then who am I to say that he didn't stop hearing the ringing? Just the logical parts of it really start to weigh on you, especially the things about evolution and how well thought out and documented that is. And that doesn't necessarily disprove Christianity, but it does say that there is another way that we could have gotten here besides 6 days and a seventh of resting.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you actually start exploring these other paths of how to explain how we are today, you start to see that there are other explanations that are in some cases better than what I have. That and it's either I can try to take that and force it into the box that I have, or I can put down the box that I have and pick up one that's better, one that has a better tool set. I think the theory of evolution is much better suited to explaining the world than fundamentalism. And then that's the core of why I could no longer be a Christian if the Christian religion relies on the perfection of the Bible. There is no possible way to make the case that the Bible is perfect, because no matter what you do, you have to say that it was put down on the page in the first place by a human hand. And so it was interpreted by the first individual to write it. And so now it's much less efficient than the way that I was thinking of it before, whereas it's the perfect word of God. Now I think it can't be, because it's interpreted through a human and is then interpreted through us as we read it, and then we talk about it and interpret it more. But it's all about interpretation. And if there's no standard by which we can live, I don't know how we could say Christianity is the right one over another religion, because all the other religions say something similar.
Could I back up?
Sure. Yeah.
And ask a question. Help me with your timeline a little bit. That video you sent me showed this lady talked about phases and timelines of her. She called it a deconversion. Is that what she called
it? A deconstruction.
Deconstruction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about if you would, because you said in high school you had a friend group
I
and
gained a friend group.
came across a couple questions, but you answered them kind of simplistically in your own mind.
Hmm.
And then you went to college. You went to a Christian school.
Yeah. At college, I didn't do a lot of direct denial, but
Uh,
it was depressing enough what I was thinking about, about how it doesn't really make sense.
I, and was that George Fox?
Yes, in Newberg, Oregon.
I know where that is. I used to live in Portland. I had a friend that taught at that school, and
It's a great school.
I've heard good things about the school,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think it would be considered a fundamentalist school.
It's not. It is a Quaker school.
Yeah, so I would think
very progressive.
I would think there could be some resources there for understanding the.
So, if I'm going to get into the details of exactly how there's the way I would describe it now, looking back on it, is serious depression and serious anxiety in doing anything at all. To the point of debilitating, and I've never been to therapy, and I've never throughout my life have I been to that, but looking past it in hindsight, which isn't exactly clear, but in hindsight it does feel like a lot of what happened was I panicked and stayed in my room a lot. I panicked and stayed in my room a lot, and when you do that, you cut yourself off from the world, you cut yourself off from the small friend group you have, and then I left George Fox, and therefore any friends I had made, basically, because it was a 4-year university, so everyone I had who was in my grade is staying there for another 3 years. So not only could I not reach out to them, it was just over. They had 3 years to. I failed, and I lost all my friends.
You're there for a year?
I was there for a year, yeah, and I regret. I don't regret anything because you have to live through them. But if I were to change something, it would have been I would not have gone to university straight out of high school. I needed more time to understand what I was about. Even going to the school on an engineering degree, I didn't want to do engineering. I wanted to do architecture. And even that was like I didn't even really have a strong idea of what I wanted to do with that or how I wanted to go about that. It was just kind of yeah, engineering seems right, so I'll do it. And and seems like people tell me I'm smart, so I might as well apply myself in that way. Yeah. And it was soon after then I started to realize something that's not exactly a depressing thought. It's a realistic thought, and that's not only including myself, most people aren't that smart. Including myself. Most people, and that's not to say that everyone's stupid, but it's to say that I put myself on you're either smart or you're stupid. And that was just in my own head for myself. And very extremes on either level. And once I confirmed that I failed, it's over. You're not smart. You're an idiot. I don't know why you're like this, but you must be wrong in some way.
I think you were sick. I think you were sick.
Yeah. Yeah. It was then that I was, once I came home and was living there that summer, I was going to kill myself. I was going to use the beam in the restroom and hang myself from the exposed ceiling. And the only reason I didn't do it wasn't because of God. It wasn't because of a feeling I felt from him. And it was comforting to pray at the time, but the reason I didn't do it is because I knew I could do more for the world alive than I could do dead. And that logical reason is one of the foundations for why you can't dismiss atheism as fundamentally flawed when you know that on the basic level that I am a supercomputer talking to other supercomputers, that there is more that supercomputer can do for the society than alive than it can do dead. Mm-hmm. And that is always the case. No matter how messed up that computer may be, it can produce something, and it can produce something positive. And the possibility for producing something positive is enough to continue existing.
I think I'd agree with you on that. Would you?
And that started my direct questioning of Christianity, and especially, and this dismantling of it, especially, like she would call it, just deconstruction.
Would you? I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but I would, in my experience, I've read and heard from very intellectual, very very intelligent people
Mm-hmm.
on both sides of the divide, atheist versus theist or Christian.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, it's not about intelligence or logic.
It's not. It's not. Mm-hmm.
It's something else.
Yeah.
You talked about how logic led you to atheism. Logic also leads people to Christianity.
Yeah. I think that once you really get down into deconstruction, it's really hard to stay Christian.
And I would disagree with you there. I think some people,
That's fine.
some atheists, over time become Christian the same way they're converted,
And vice versa.
and some Christians are deconverted or deconstructed. My grandfather was 79. He was in World War II and would not talk to me about God, had no interest in prayer, religion, anything else like that. He was 79 when he was converted and became a Christian.
Yeah.
I think I told you about Lee Strobel, the Chicago Tribune investigative journalist who won the Pulitzer Prize, and he investigated the Chicago police force and discovered some corruption there. He's very skeptical. And when his wife became a Christian, she started going to Willow Creek Community Church, and he thought, well, it's just a phase. And then she got baptized, and he's like, oh no, she can't fall for this. This is illogical. This is anti-intellectual. And so he spent a 3-year journey investigating Christianity, and at the end of it said it's the evidence is overwhelming for Christianity. He had to become a Christian. He was compelled logically to by the evidence that he discovered, because he said, I'm going to follow the facts wherever they lead.
Yeah.
So it happens both ways. There are atheists who become Christians logically based on fact, based on history, based on evidence. And then there are the same things. There are Christians who fall away also based on facts and evidence. And I don't think that intelligence or logic or investigation is the difference between belief and non-belief. I think there's something deeper.
I would assume that you would say doubt is not a sin.
Doubt is a prerequisite for faith. You must, if you never doubt, then I don't think you genuinely believe.
Denial, though, would be a sin.
Denial of God.
Truth. Denial of Christian truth. At the very least, denial of Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior is, in fact, a sin, which would be denial. Denial of truth.
Sin, I think sin is going against the grain of the universe. Like so, for example, gravity. You don't deny gravity. I mean, you can deny it.
Have you seen Friends?
No, I've seen
the show Friends. At one point, Phoebe says, it's just recently I've been feeling like I've been pushed. I'm being pushed rather than pulled. Like she's being pushed into the earth rather than pulled into it. And she says that's why she doesn't believe in gravity.
So you can if you wish to disbelieve in gravity, but that won't change the effects of gravity in your life. You can disbelieve in God. You can disbelieve in morality. You can disbelieve in sin. You can break God's laws. So we don't break the law of gravity, right? It's just a law in the universe. You don't really break God's laws either, whether it's adultery or lying or stealing or the moral laws of the universe. Slavery, racism. Economic injustice. You don't so much break God's laws as you break yourself against them. So like you could say, I don't believe in gravity, and jump off of a building.
Yeah.
And you fall to the rocks below and you break your body, break your bones. You could say, I don't believe in marriage.
That would convince you that
you say, I don't believe in marriage. I don't believe in economic justice, or I don't believe racism is wrong. You could live as though God's laws are not valid, but you're going against the grain of the universe, and you end up wrecking your life. That's how I feel.
That is a theory that it seems like Christians all hold, that going against God's word will directly lead you into a worse situation.
I think it leads society and individuals down. Now, I don't believe that every single individual is going to have a horrible life because they disbelieve in God. I think there's some
Right.
atheists, there's Hindus, there's Muslims who have excellent morals and character and live very good lives.
Except that they will not spend eternity with Jesus, with God.
I don't think any Christian, myself included,
Mm-hmm.
lives a morally pure and good life in the eyes of God.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone does. I know my heart is dark. The Bible teaches that all sin and fall short of the glory of God, that all of us are corrupt, that we all have, our hearts are bent in a sense, our desires. We want things we shouldn't want. It's like, why does all the stuff kill me taste so good?
An inescapable selfishness for like desire for like pleasure above other
That
people's.
that ends up wrecking me. Yeah. If you lead it to its logical end, alcohol, sex, whatever, money, if you follow it and make that your purpose, your life end, you end up destroying yourself.
Yeah. I guess I would love for that to be true, and I really would, but that describes Christianity as like the holder of the manual by which we should live. And Christianity would actually say the holder of truth isn't static, and that's true.
No, it's not. And Jesus said truth is a person.
Mm.
He said,
Yeah,
I
so
am the way, the truth, and the life.
would you say
Truth is
that faith is a tool in which we use to achieve truth?
Hey, ask that again.
Would faith be a tool by which we is a tool that we use to achieve truth, to attain truth?
Faith is a tool to attain truth.
Or is it the tool to find truth?
I've never thought about that question. That's a good question.
Because you actually have to have faith that Christianity is correct before you could actually come to the conclusion that Christianity is correct. But
No, I
you
disagree
believe
with
that
that.
Christianity is. Well,
I
if
think Lee
you have to
Strobel's
believe that
example,
Jesus.
no, I think with Lee Strobel's example, someone who had prejudice against Christianity and was suspicious about it and thought there's no way it could be true, after researching and discovering the evidence for Christianity, was 100% convinced that this has to be true.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
No, I was convinced that it
he
was.
started with disbelief,
Mm-hmm.
non-faith. The most famous Christian in the world of all time was Paul the Apostle. He wrote half the Bible. He started his career killing Christians.
Half the New Testament.
I'm sorry, half the New Testament. Hey, you're correcting me.
Well, that's a little thing. Easy
You're sharpening.
mistake.
You're sharpening me. So he came to Christianity from an absolute point of resistance.
Yeah.
The brother of Jesus is another example, James. He only wrote one book of the New Testament, one letter, but according to the Gospels, Jesus's family thought he was kind of nuts. When he claimed to be able to heal people and be God, they kind of wanted to take him home.
Yeah.
And
you meet people like that.
They didn't want him strung up on a cross, right? So
right.
His brothers kind of actually made fun of him. And if anybody knows who the real deal is, it would be his family. Well, according to the testimonies of those who knew Jesus and his followers, that brother, something radically changed him. He was a skeptic like Paul. He totally did not believe Jesus was who he said he was until something happened. He had an experience of the resurrected Jesus, which is the same thing Paul claimed happened to him on the road to Damascus. He claimed a voice spoke to him and he couldn't see, and then he had this experience. So these people who were very skeptical and they were not coming at it with faith. They were coming at it with disbelief.
Yeah.
One of the most famous apostles is Doubting Thomas. He said, I'm not going to believe until I put my fingers in the holes. There's no way Jesus came back to life.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I'm not going to believe. You can't. There's no one that can convince me it's not possible for someone to come back to life.
Yeah.
So there's example after example of people starting out from a place of disbelief. coming to belief. So you do not have to start out with faith. In fact, blind faith, I don't think is real faith.
Yeah, I agree.
You can't just tell me, well, believe because the Bible says it, or just believe because the church says it, or believe because that's what a good Christian should believe.
A lot of people are looking for someone to put the rules in front of them so they can just follow them.
That blind faith is not taught in Scripture. Scripture teaches to test and approve the truth, to question and to doubt.
How many of us have ever talked to a prostitute?
Jesus did.
Yeah, but how many of us as individuals, Christians today or non-Christians, do we get the chance to talk to a prostitute? Never. Jesus did, though. And that's kind of the truth, though. You actually have to fully immerse yourself in someone else's world to actually understand what they're going through.
Jesus was an outcast from the religious establishment. And if you, Jacob, feel like you cannot accept the religious establishment of today, you may be closer to Jesus than you think.
In a lot of ways, I feel like I said, if I believe that the climax of the Bible would be the Pilate's decision to go through with it, because from that point on, he was to be crucified. He was going to be crucified. There was once Pilate says this is going to happen, then it's going to happen. So that would be like the beginning of the climax for me, or the peak of the climax. I genuinely want to search for the truth. And that led me to some interesting questions when you actually considered the Bible. We talked about it, and you agreed. Slavery is wrong.
Yes.
I know a few verses I recognize a few verses of the Bible offhand. John 3:16, but that's not important.
That's not important?
To this point.
To this discussion. Okay.
Yeah. What was it called? Exodus 21, I believe, is instructions from God to his people on how to keep slaves. Yeah. For 6 years, for the Hebrews themselves within their group, you can't have slaves except for when you do, and you get them for 6 years, and on the 7th you have to let them go, unless specific reasons. And if they agree to, then you can pierce their ear and they're yours forever. Right. But that's only in that specific situation. Right. As for the nations around you, you can have them forever. And also putting value on the male slaves as basically worth about twice as much as the female slaves. So, and that's directly from God, which is really interesting to me, because I would view God as timeless, and when I viewed God, I would view him as timeless and consistent, and in no way ever made a mistake in what he was saying. So to believe that God can't make a mistake is to also view that verse was perfect in its own right, to express to people that you actually literally can own people as slaves and even beat them as long as they don't die.
Look at polygamy. I mean, how many people in the Old Testament have multiple wives?
But this is what I'm saying. Jesus was supposedly not meant to deny anything that happened in the Old Testament or deny the scriptures. He was supposed to confirm them. And he actually did confirm that slavery itself was acceptable. So now I'm at an awkward position where if I want to be Christian, I actually have to believe that in certain circumstances, slavery is acceptable. Or if I was a slave, I should actually serve my master instead of immediately try to escape.
No, I don't think that's. I don't know of any Christians today that practice slavery.
I agree, because slavery is wrong.
I think that Christianity. I think the world practiced slavery until Christianity came along. I think you can make a case historically. Now, I'm not denying that Christians were. Christians also participated in slavery. Not denying that.
Yeah.
However, the seeds for the destruction of slavery, I think, came from Christianity.
Even though the verses that I was just talking about in Exodus would actually be used to ensure that the slaves behave.
Because, the Bible talks about God permitting certain things that he does not like divorce.
How could God permit something that is...
Hey, listen. Jesus was questioned about that. Can a man divorce his wife? Because in the Old Testament, there's prescriptions about divorcing. We've got 5 minutes, by the way.
Sure. Yeah.
There's certain prescriptions for about how to put away your wife.
Oof.
Divorce. But God was always limiting the evil of that time period.
Mm-hmm.
Like eye for an eye, that's that's in the Old Testament, right? But Jesus, Gandhi said, an eye for an eye, and the whole world goes blind.
And good quote.
Jesus said, love your neighbor, love your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
God wasn't saying if your eye pokes out, you have to poke out someone else's eye. That's not the point. The point of the law was to limit. If your eye gets poked out, the most you can do is poke out someone's eye. You can't chop off their hand. So he's limiting the evil of that culture.
So, which I guess we know you especially talk about the nature of God pretty often. Which is more moral, slavery or no slavery? Which one is a more moral stance?
Jesus didn't. He didn't.
Yeah, no, this is not slavery. Quoting the Bible. This is between you and me. Which is moral and which is immoral? Freedom, yeah, exactly. Slavery, in no case I could ever imagine it would be permissible. Actually, to be morally permissible, there's no situation.
So, is it possible for God to gradually reduce and eliminate slavery, or does He have to constantly, in one fell swoop, remove slavery from the planet?
If slavery is as bad as murder, which I would say it's kind of basically is.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you just say don't have slaves or don't hold each other as slaves, but pay them well as their due, as
there's
they
a lot
are
of
owed.
Evil that God permits,
but not commanded by God. Generally,
He did not command them to take slaves.
He said that they could, though.
He also said they could divorce their wife, which God hates. The Bible, the Old Testament, not Jesus, the Old Testament says that God hates divorce.
Yeah.
Yet He wanted to protect women by giving them some legal rights so that you couldn't just divorce them for any reason whatsoever.
Do you think it was weird that when it came to the slaves that the men were worth more than the women? I think that was like, I mean, on a property basis, you could see why they would do that, but you think that it would be kind of
I also
awkward
think it's interesting that a pregnant woman gets extra compensation if her baby is killed in the Old Testament, the unborn child within her is killed, she's also gets some compensation for that unborn child. Because
but that's it's like an outlier, most, it happened, but it's still saying that slavery is okay, except in this situation. This situation, they must be set free, or this situation, they must be compensated.
Yeah, I see a progressive movement towards the freedom of slaves. In fact, in the New Testament, there is no command to free slaves.
Yeah. Wild, considering that it's absolutely entirely immoral.
That's a big question. Why didn't Jesus come out and say slavery is always wrong in any circumstance?
Why do you think he didn't?
I think that in those days, slavery was different than it is today. It wasn't racial.
It was the nations around the Hebrews, so the Hebrews
today,
are the exception.
I'm talking about in the Roman world, in the Roman Empire.
No, this was about the Hebrews.
But in the Roman times when Jesus was living, I'm talking New Testament. But that's a good conversation. I want to go back to Genesis maybe on our next podcast, because I've done some research on that I'd love to talk about.
If you want to go over, I'm fine with that. But if you want to, it's 8:00, so we can
just catch my breath. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. If you want, we can set up another appointment.
I would absolutely love to. Maybe in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Is Sunday better or is Wednesday?
Right now, Sunday's probably better.
Okay.
Is that okay for you?
That's fine with me.
Good.
Maybe I'll look at the calendar and I'll let you know what days work for me, and I'll see what works for you.
Thanks for sharing your story with me and some of your questions.
I look forward to talking with you again.
Me too, Jacob. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.